Greetings and hello everybody. I'm Gerd Leonhard, futurist in Zurich, Switzerland. It's my great pleasure to contribute a keynote today to LPI's Brave New World event. I'm going to speak to you about the future, of course, and about shaping the business that we want, finding out what the future may hold and how we can design it best. One thing is for sure, we're moving into a future where science fiction is becoming science fact, not just Blade Runner and the flying taxis that we already are seeing today, but everything around us. You can kind of say, well, the next 10 years will probably bring more change than the previous 100 years. I mean, it's an obvious conclusion when we're looking at things that have happened in the last 20 years. Free music, basically free phone calls, new ways of transportation, artificial intelligence. Now we have virtual rooms where we can have meetings. Facebook is launching a VR workspace. Good luck with that, but it seems like an interesting idea, the virtual reality scenario. And of course, autonomous vehicles that can park themselves and of course even drive themselves. And the dancing robots that Boston Dynamics has shown us on YouTube. This is a great example because just 10 years ago, a robot even trying to open a door would have just smashed the whole building, and now they can do this. So it's basically exponential change and science fiction becoming science fact. It's very important to understand this, I think, especially in your business, when it's about insurance and legal matters, and of course e-commerce and digital commerce. We are leaping into the future. We're not going linearly, step by step. We are at 4, and the next step is not 5, it's 8, 16, 32. Exponential means Moore's law, Metcalfe's law. Simple examples here, 30 steps from here will bring you out to the street or into my other studio there, and 30 steps exponentially are 26 trips around the world. Think about this for a second. 10 years from now, it's not going to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 10, and so on. It's going to be leaping 4, 8, 16, 32. That means roughly 256 times as fast and as far from today. If you have kids, you got to think about that. Our kids are going to live in a world that will be easily 1,000,000 times as different in 20 years, exponentially, leaping. Very important to keep that in mind as we're looking at, especially today, because we're at the pivot point of this. We're not at 1, 1, 2, 3 is kind of like 1, 2, 4. Now we're leaping really fast into the future. And because of the COVID crisis, it's also safe to say that we're not going back to the sort of normal parenthesis. We may go back to restaurants and traveling and possibly even cruise ships and things like that, but our mindset has shifted, right? There's a whole bunch of new normals that we find normal, like working from home, doing things for the common good, thinking about the existential future, climate change coming up as a sort of new challenge to our normal. I think we're entering a kind of really interesting golden era after the COVID rebound, probably sometime next year, where it's big opportunities, but at the same time, big confusion. Like we already have that today, considerable chaos. But the next 10 years, the changes, the opportunities will be absolutely astounding. And I think if you understand the future, then this will give you a very big leg up in terms of preparing for that time that's coming, that kind of rebound effect that we're seeing all around us. And basically what we see here is that we have this acceleration of COVID-19. This kind of everything was there before, but all of a sudden it's faster, right? So telemedicine, e-commerce, and working online and working from home, and all of these things that were there before, but now it's real. Even a 75-year-old person that has never used a smartphone can buy stuff from Uber Eats now. So it's basically 3 different things that are happening here. Big tech and technology is everywhere, especially in insurance and also in legal work. I mean, technology is revolutionizing every single sector, from media to entertainment to mobility to, of course, the pharma, the healthcare business, financial, and so on. But on top of that big green, right, we are essentially facing that COVID-19 is a test run for climate change. And this is now getting very real. Watch the Glasgow thing in just a couple of weeks, the COP26 conference emerging with some huge news, and the collaboration there will be absolutely essential. And finally, you could call it big state or big human or big purpose, but basically we're saying, okay, we need to define a world and economic logic that goes beyond just one thing, profit and growth. It has to go build a better world, right? So people, planet, profit, purpose, that's now emerging as a major topic in society and of course also in business. And it's really important to realize, when we look back at the pandemic, what has happened is that technology has exploded, of course, in value. And that shows us what's happening. Basically, every business is being impacted by technology, and not just in the COVID crisis yet, but we basically have the end of analog business. We're doing business digitally now, and it's going to converge completely. There will be very few businesses left that are not digital. Of course, some products are analog, like food and others, but insurance, well, that's becoming a digital product. Remote everything and virtual anywhere, anytime, anywhere around the world. I mean, we're looking at roughly 2030, we're going to have almost 9 billion people on the internet, twice as many at least as compared to today, and with cheap devices and fast speed. That's going to change everything. I mean, selling insurance online, yeah, well, that will be like kind of using WhatsApp or Spotify for music. Right? So consumers have seen changes in every part of their lives, whether it's shopping or consumption, learning, playing, entertainment, and of course healthcare and well-being. And we're not going back to forgetting how all of that worked, because it works great and it's about to get better. I mean, Zoom was just the beginning of having an online conference, an online conversation. Very soon it's holograms for everybody. We're going to be living in a virtuality environment. Also a huge challenge for us as humans, of course, not all as easy as it sounds. But we're heading towards the sort of global paradigm shifts that have been only egged on by the COVID crisis. They were there before, but now they're much bigger. So, for example, as we're going warp drive into this, it's quite clear that COVID has sort of accelerated the changes in trade and technology and geopolitics and economics. It's kind of like warp drive button, when you go to watch Star Trek and they hit the button and off you go into a new kind of acceleration. So first wave COVID-19, that is kind of rebounding and hopefully wrapping up in some way, becoming normal, parenthesis, in the next couple of years. And then climate change, which is a much bigger, 1,000x of what we've done for COVID. And after that, and along with this, the change of economic logic. Well, we will never tackle climate change if we don't change the economic logic. And that will impact every single business, every consumer, especially millennials, Gen Y, kids between 25 and 35. They want to know that you care, that you have great solutions, but not just great tech, that you really care about them. The whole discussion about Facebook and what Facebook is doing wrong is primarily about this. Facebook doesn't care anymore. They care about the $130 million profit a day. And that's become a real issue. So these three waves are coming your way, and I think these are primarily opportunities. They feel tough right now, especially COVID, of course. That's been disastrous for many of us. And I'm definitely in that camp of saying, well, we have to acknowledge that too, and think and deal with the pain that has come out of this. But as we're going forward into this world, it's like we're taking the globe and we're shaking it up, and every business is completely different, moving a different direction. Like the cruise ship business, that's not going to come back as we know it. Flying, that will come back, but not a lot of fly shaming going on, and people are thinking twice about flying like they used to, and certainly I do. New paradigms, new stories, new narratives, new rules, and new priorities. This is the priority of the future. That's emerging right now in the business roundtable discussions, in all of this COP meetings and the G20 meetings. People, planet, purpose, and prosperity as a new paradigm of society. That's the framework of future insurance as well. As a whole, lives are changing because of this. And that's the next decade. So again, mind-boggling changes that we have to get ready for, mostly opportunities. Like all of the technological game changers, and I use the word game changers a lot. You want to find out more about my game changers, just Google for Gerd, my name, G-E-R-D, and game changers, you'll find lots of stuff. Or just go to gerdsgamechangers.com, that's my shortcut. And the mega shift. So let's dive right in here. Basically, the framework around us is changing, right? It's not just the picture. Marshall McLuhan said this, Alvin Toffler said this. We have to take a wider view and say, well, it's not just data. It's not just the cloud. It's not just one of those things. It's all of them. I'll talk more about that in a second. But basically, the 10 game changes are all coming together to completely redo how things are being done. And the media business was only first, and advertising and search and technology. Now it's transportation, micromobility, and banking, and all of that stuff basically impacted together. Right? Again, tidal wave, perfect storm in so many ways, you could say. So in my last book, chapter 3 was about the megashifts, and you can download that for free at megashifts.digital in 10 different languages. And it talks about basically the opportunities that are arising from technology, from the game changers, which include, of course, the disintermediation, the virtualization, the cognification, the getting smart of systems, as we're moving into a future where that is becoming the new normal, that systems are smart, that we have lots of automation and robotization, right? Basically, that is going to change every business, I think, for the good. However, with moderation, right? This is, of course, the key. In the end, we're going to need some sort of balance between what technology can do and what it should do. Like, think about our work situation, the automation of work. That is a factor for sure. But I don't believe that the automation of routines, which I'll talk about later, is going to do away with our jobs. It will just do away with the routines. And if your job is 100% routine, that of course becomes an issue. But we can see how that's impacting insurance around the world in this little wall, like all the stuff that's happening with the automation of insurance and insurtech, in predictive analytics and all that stuff. I mean, all you have to do is scan the headlines to see hundreds of reports about how this could work and what it can do. I'm sure you're looking at this very closely. So a couple examples here. Basically what's happening is that data is the new oil. That's already a very old statement, really. But it's also a new plutonium. It can be used as a weapon, as Facebook and social media has shown. So that's going to be strictly regulated, and that's something to really be careful about. Using data without falling into the trap of abuse that has been widely spread on the internet and social media and search and Google, of course, right? So the voice control is a new keyboard. We'll be able to speak to computers as if they were humans, and that's already starting, and many of you, I'm sure, are already using this for dictating emails and speaking to devices. But very soon I'm going to speak to my wristwatch and say, please get me the best offer on this particular insurance issue that I have, and we'll just automatically do it. The Internet of Things, connected everything, connected ecosystems, connected devices, connected cars, and everything. That's basically roughly 2 trillion devices by 2030. That is like the new browser. So we can find out what your car did. We can find out what your refrigerator needs, or what kind of food you may need, right? Everything. That could be both heaven or hell, because think about the surveillance issues there. And lastly, of course, the strongest one is what's happening with artificial intelligence. That is kind of the new electricity. Without that, we don't really know how to make sense from the data, because it's just too much for us to look at. So if a doctor looks at 300 million pictures of potential melanomas, that's kind of overwhelming. And the good doctor has seen maybe 100,000, but not 100 million. And that's what AI does. So important to remember right now, really what we're talking about right now is IA, right? Intelligent assistance. AI is still kind of, to a large degree, a concept that hasn't really been fulfilled. It has been promised, for example, by IBM Watson. But really what we have here is intelligent systems that are smart. They're not intelligent like us. And now they're going to steal our work. Well, they're going to change our work for sure. Because any kind of assistance like this, I'm going to get more time freed up, for example, using virtual reality, as you can see here with the Oculus Rift, that Facebook has already put out for quite some time. Very interesting device. And we're going to be able to dive into data like Tom Cruise in Minority Report, pulling out data and finding information and just making decisions 100 times as fast. That is going to be very powerful, but also very confusing, because imagine if we don't use it anymore, what are you going to do then? Feel bored. And then the blockchain, in addition, is one of those things that's basically going to be everywhere. I don't think Bitcoin is a big deal with money, because money has to be centralized and state supervised, I think, for now. But transactional, yeah, I mean, every transactional system is going to use the blockchain, smart contracts, of course, to bring in transaction costs. But payments, I think, maybe a state digital currency. We're going to see roughly in the next 5 to 8 years unfolding that we have a digital currency around the world, replacing the dollar to some degree at least. Right? So transactional default is quite easily here. And really what it means that exponential technologies are impacting insurance, all kinds of insurance, including legal protection and risk insurance, to a very large degree. So let's start here, for example, by AI that can significantly enhance decision making. That's going to be essential. It cannot predict the future, but it can enhance decision making, like Google Maps, basically, like Google Maps for the legal landscape. Is it a genius? No, it's not like humans. We still need our own senses. It can, of course, technology will lower the cost of the commodity costs of all of that stuff, but human-only tasks will remain. And I think it would be very dangerous to get rid of humans in that process and just rely on the kind of context missing AI that we have today. But the customer service and experience can be greatly improved. I mean, we can see that with all digital companies like Amazon and others, subscription offerings, of course. And of course, really the big deal here is bias and the lack of contextual understanding, misleading issues and black box issues, which means you don't understand what the AI is saying. So that has to be seen all in the context of a holistic picture of the future. You know, technology is interesting, but it's not a panacea. And I think somebody once said that algorithms know the logic of everything, but the feelings of nothing. And that's really what humans are all about. I mean, we're not so much about data, we're about emotions, understanding. Our intelligence is emotional, it's social, it's much larger than a machine, at least for the time being. So that brings me to an important point about humans and machines and human intelligence, HI, and AI. Very important we understand the difference also between the sort of science fiction approach of artificial intelligence that people have set forth in Black Mirror and of course Transcendence and all of the shows that you've seen like Ex Machina. If we define AI like the CEO of DeepMind did, Demis Hassabis, we're turning information and data into knowledge. That's what AI does. Then we have to think about, well, knowledge, isn't that what we have? But what kind of knowledge does a machine have? I mean, really what's happening here is that from AI, there's been two really explosive sectors. That's machine learning and deep learning. That's where all the action is, right? So machine learning is to find insights without programming machines. That is the crucial point right now. So looking at patterns and saying, well, it looks like this is something that is a rule or a logic. And deep learning, of course, is to create patterns for the use in decision making. When they come together, we have a really interesting approach to the future. We're not talking about a substitutional approach here. We're talking about a powerful technology that humans will use. For example, this one is a great one, powered by GPT-3, which is an open AI application. And here you can speak to a computer or you can type, and it will fill out the spreadsheet. You don't have to learn Excel anymore. Interesting proposition. It seems like a great shortcut, but would it be helpful to learn Excel? Who knows what the future brings? But this is really intelligent assistance. Very powerful stuff. Replacement of us? No. Magic sauce? A little bit, kind of like Google Maps or the great Gmail solutions. But hey, we're still there. We're still doing what we have to do, like driving a car. We're still driving ourselves, but getting assistance. What's important to realize about AI is the Moravec paradox. Whatever is easy for a computer is hard for a human, and vice versa. So when we meet, for example, in person, humans can get straight to the point in 0.4 seconds, recognize the other human. Artificial intelligence will have a much harder time with that because it doesn't smell, it doesn't really listen the same way, it doesn't get the signals of body language very easily. Yeah, it's missing all of those things. It can just sort of look at the facts or maybe your facial muscles or recognize obvious emotions and things like this. And this is why we have to be careful about intelligent assistants and AI kind of telling us what to do. I think it's going to be a great tool, but can we use that tool and just kind of jump the gun and say, well, all decisions are made by this? I doubt it. Like, for example, in the legal process of basically ending jail sentences or allowing people to go out on probation. That doesn't strike me as a great place for artificial intelligence to make decisions. So I very much like this picture of what we're seeing here in the future, the kind of job displacements, and you see down here, financial and insurance are kind of in that part to where there is going to be some displacement. But basically, moving up here, you can see really where's the growth because of AI, communications, education, scientific, technical, health, right? Really what we're seeing here is a quite simple conclusion, is that machines are for answers and humans are for questions. Picasso said that, and Dali, and then Kevin Kelly. And now you get to hear it here. This is very important. We need to ask more questions because questions are about understanding. They're not just about putting facts together and creating logic and keeping it all in a safe place. So here, very important as we go into that future of machines understanding humans. Yeah, it's probably not going to be as easy as it sounds. We should never mistake a good view, a clear view, with a short distance, Paul Sappho once said. Very important. Stuart Russell, who writes all the books, all the great books about AI, he wrote one recently called Human Compatible that I definitely recommend you would read on this. He says it's about competence when we think about AI and intelligent machines, not consciousness. We don't want them to be conscious. I certainly wouldn't want to. It's enough if they're competent, if they can do the job, so that I can focus on the important human things. So this question I get all the time, will AI kill my business? Would it do away with the concept of risk or insurance per se? And my answer on that is really quite clear. We have this kind of thinking of dataism right now, that data can solve all the problems as long as we have enough data. We can believe the data. But data isn't all that we need to make decisions. A lot of things are soft data and contextual data and hidden information, right? And tacit knowledge. So we have this temptation of where we think that everything can be automated because we have enough data. I don't think really that's the case. I think we can automate, of course, welding in a factory or tractor driving across the field or running ad campaigns to some degree. But still there are other factors that we need to make decisions. They're very important in the legal industry and in providing legal coverage and risk assessment and legal protection insurance like you guys do, is to understand this kind of, we're not dealing with a mechanism of just logic here. Humans aren't algorithms, and organisms are different than algorithms, as some people have tried to argue that we're kind of the same. But here's the Chubb CEO David Greenberg, who says insurance is the art and science of taking risk. Fundamentally, that's the business. Everything else is there to support it. And can we quantify that risk all the way down to the very end? I think that's highly unlikely. I think we're moving to the future where this is going to remain our reality when it's about human factors. Yes, no, maybe. Well, it depends, right? We'll change our mind. Ask me again tomorrow. The future is not as predictable as sometimes we thought. The COVID crisis told us this. And yes, we can have better foresight. But prediction is another matter altogether. I think really what's happening here is a great saying here, riffing off Sir Francis Bacon, a famous poet, who says, if we try to predict our future with certainty, we'll end up in doubt. If we start with doubts, we may end up with certainty. So let's allow some doubts here. That's really the business of insurance also, is to deal with the risk. As Amazon's boss, Jeff Bezos, ex-boss, said, when it comes to really important decision, data trumps intuition every time, on one hand. On the other hand, he says in an interview last year, all of my best decisions have been made with hard intuition, guts, not analysis. So it's really about the handshake between those two things. That's what your job comes down to. And it's art and science, right? Like Steve Jobs used to say about his business, technology and art and science. That's going to come together there. And because of this, we also need to think about the ethical aspects of work and technology and insurance. Because basically what's happening is technology is driving our society everywhere around the world, and we're inventing fast and furious. But ethics define our society. And here's the definition of ethics, is knowing the difference between what you have the right or the power to do and what is the right thing to do. That's going to be, it's so crucial. For example, using face recognition to see if a customer is lying or cheating or not speaking the truth or hiding something. I think that's a dubious idea, for example, for bank loans. Yes, I understand the business logic behind it, but we have to think about the ethical impact, like face recognition, like data surveillance, like what's happening in social media, distorting reality, fake news, and so on. So I think we need sort of an ethics council. This would be great for your industry as well. A bunch of really smart people who say, well, maybe this is not the right approach to solving this problem. Maybe it's dehumanizing. A very important point. Ethics really drive our human society. Technology fuels our progress in our economy. But when we look at really complex fields like this, bias prevention, diversity, transparency, explainability, is the machine going to give us a conclusive answer? Well, if it does, it will be devoid of every human consideration, values and ethics. I think we need to always keep the humans in the loop. I call it HITL. Well, many people call it HITL, but that is going to be, I think, ultimately the key to creating a more human product and also making the customer understand that you're still human. So on that note, let's talk about what it means to be human, the future of human work. And I think it's obvious to all of us that are observing the space a little bit, anything that can be digitized or virtualized or robotized will be. It's going to be to some degree the end of routines. It's, kind of digital Darwinism, you could say. So whatever routine you have in your job, whether it's fact-finding or legal discovery or so, you can use machines and technology. You can speak to a computer and say, tell me the future development of this kind of legal scenario and what are the likelihoods to happen and so on. And it will do that in a factual way right now. I used to write research reports, and now people are buying stuff from Google Trends, or rather getting it for free from Google Trends. So here's an example. Deloitte has an early warning system for financial distress that they use it for risk calculation. And is it like a human? No, but it's a powerful tool. And all of these things that people have talked about in the past, we can hand them over to robots, logging in, moving files, attracting content, making calculations, powerful tools. And that's the routines that are going to go away. Some jobs are a lot of routine. Like you could argue somebody at the cash register in the supermarket is 95% routine. But on the other hand, somebody at the cash register in a small local tobacco store somewhere in France, they are crucial to the community and they can't be automated. So it's one of those things where we have to say, well, it looks automatable, but ultimately, are we going to become useless because machines can do our routines? Like driving, right? How many really truly self-driving cars have you seen? And is that really desirable, what we want? I think we're going to see a lot of assisted driving, which means I can hop into a bubble, like a car bubble, so to speak, and cruise around the city without paying attention to traffic. I could do that, and that would be very useful. But going 200 kilometers an hour in Germany on the highway, on the Autobahn, that's probably not such a good idea. We're not going to be useless. I think dirty, dull, and dangerous 3D tasks, right, they will certainly be done by machines to a large degree. So we're freed up to do new things. It's important to realize, however, and this is crucial, I think, in your domain of insurance and legal work, of course, in general, if you work like a robot will take your job. And so many of us don't work like robots, but a little bit of what our robotic work, that's going to be taken by machines. That will really change our work environment. And I also say, if you learn like a robot, right, a robot will take your job, or you'll never have a job to begin with. And it's really important for your kids not to be a robot, but to learn differently. And in this world, really, this unfolding pyramid of changes is reflected in a pyramid of work. So we're moving up this food chain from intellectual knowledge and logic, which machines can have, to some degree at least, to deeper knowledge, tacit knowledge, understanding, wisdom, consciousness, human agency. That's where we are going. And we have to get ready for this and say, well, it's important to be good with tacit information, to read between the lines, what are called the human-only skills, right? The traits that only humans have, because we're conscious, we have human agency. Let the machines take over the machine turf, right? Let them learn what we're doing there to support us. I think that's going to be a valuable shift for most of us. Not something to be afraid of, something that may feel a little bit like giving up authority, right? But when we look in this direction, it's really quite clear that's going to fade away, and we're going to move to up a sort of Maslowian pyramid here. So let me describe some new horizons for legal protection insurance, some ideas I've been having while I've been reading about all the things that are possible in this turf. So first, of course, there's going to be a blended customer communication experience, digital, online Zoom, and so on, virtual and virtuality rooms, in person. That's going to be completely blended. Very important to keep that in mind. There's lots of people who don't want the virtual only for the time being, but lots of others who want only that. So there's going to be sort of a fragmentation there. Instant automated underwriting, fueled by artificial intelligence. That is going to be something that is really powerful, great service. People want that. The rise of subscriptions, bundles. But they're going to be fragmented for certain products, and we can talk about that later in the question and answer session. But usage-based insurance models are exploding. Of course, you see that. Whether that's going to be happening with legal, I kind of doubt it, because it's hard to gauge that use. It's not like you're buying a camera or a car and you want to insure it. But on-demand, customizable products that can be altered instantly. That's all web-based services. That's happening all around us in the cloud and virtually. Very fast claims processing with robotic process automation. But human supervision is going to still be crucial there, because, again, the context is missing a lot of times. It will improve over years and going to really make a big difference. And agents becoming a more like process facilitators and guides and and educators and holding customers' hand in that process. But I don't think the role of the agent will shrink. It will just morph to be more about the human things. And much improved experience, and there we have a long way to go there for insurance. Buying and changing products on websites and of course mobile sites, ultimately of course the so-called metaverse that Zuckerberg calls it. So the bottom line of digital Darwinism I mentioned earlier is this, right? If you can be dispensed with, you will be. Right? In other words, if somebody has invented something that makes you superfluous, like Craigslist was taking away the ads from the big daily newspapers, then you will be. And the other thing that's happening there is really also clear that we need to constantly add value, right, for future success. I mean, always adding something new so that we stay valuable and that we learn about a customer and give them things that they may need. The greatest example really is Salesforce, for example, how they've been constantly reinventing, and now of course they bought Slack. Great move in the right direction. The car industry is a great example. Right? We're going from this simple idea of owning a car and paying for that, and now we talk about mobility. Right? Now it's a mobility ecosystem. It's a system to where everybody has to work together in micromobility, where you can't own the customer completely, where the margin is different. It's kind of like the music business. Now it's a digital ecosystem. Constantly adding value is key to your success. And I think for the insurance business and for your business, the legal risk insurance, it really means becoming an indispensable platform, where people feel like they are protected. They can trust you. They can find other services and not just one thing. Right? And the platform business, of course, has been winning pretty much across all domains, whether it's e-commerce or mobility or, of course, media and entertainment. Tesla has done great with this, becoming a platform for automated driving. That's still very ambitious, but bottom line is this. As we're looking around, lots of people are buying subscription services. I mean, look at the numbers. That has been basically 10 years ago, we were saying nobody's going to spend that kind of money on subscribing. Now, I don't know how many subscriptions you have, but I have like 15 at least for all kinds of platforms. And insurance will easily go that way, even with certain products, to be on a subscription basis and an up and down selling option. But in the long run, it's really the information economy being substituted by this experience economy. And Pine and Gilmore talked about this in 1999, about how we're moving from selling commodities and services to basically selling experience and transformations. That's the ticket. That's the ticket for legal insurance, right? Selling an experience, transforming your customer, much like these guys have done, Spotify, Netflix, Airbnb, Tesla, Zero, is to focus on experiences, not just products, where you can constantly expect new things. And in this convergence of what's happening right now between pretty much everywhere in the world and vastly accelerating, this deep convergence of the digital and virtual and the physical, right? Some people call it phygital, which is a combination of digital and physical. And that's really happening all around us. We need a holistic customer experience. And that picks up wherever you are, whether you're 75 years old and you don't want to use the mobile quite yet, or the Apple Watch or something, right? Or whether you're 25. And that's going to be crucial to basically come up with this. And ideas like this, for example, as you can see back in, I think this was Minority Report or one of those science fiction films, where we can have sort of precognition of what's happening. I think we may be looking at a model like this, basically rather than covering legal issues, is to prevent them. And that may be an interesting angle, I think, for a new business line, business segment. We've seen that in healthcare and food, and lots of healthcare companies are funding preventative medicine and holistic food and customized food services now. That's all going in the same direction. Rather than paying when something goes wrong, is to prevent it from going wrong. I think that's an interesting business model to look at. Completely different angle on the logic. Taking a wider view. I mean, this is what's it all going to be about, basically going from this idea of just a focus on operations to a focus on what might be. Right? So question your assumptions. Take a wider view of your business. What else could it be? What other resources do you have? What else can you sell? So let me wrap up by saying, well, that's been great about the future, but so what? What do we do now? This is a common problem when you listen to a futurist. So let's talk about what we can actually do now to make this happen. First, we have to stop looking at the rear view mirror and say it worked fine in the past, it will work again, because that's just simply not true anymore. Basically what's happening is that the future is now happening faster than we would ever thought, and the future is a mindset. It's not a time frame. The future is here. We just haven't noticed. It's really important that we develop a future mindset, and the future mindset, of course, has to do with understanding the complexity, the fragmentation, all the noise, right? To not get overwhelmed, to get used to information, to be able to sort it, to anticipate it. This is the future mindset. I've used this picture for a long time. It's such a great picture. You know, just observing, paying attention, and taking in information and learning about the future. That will save your business, because as soon as you're a little bit more in the future mindset and future readiness, right, then basically this is what happens. You understand the holistic approach to your business. And that leads you to different conclusions. All of the CEOs of the major tech companies, this is what they do, right? They pay attention, they listen, they look at facts and everything, but in the end, it's about coming up with a holistic solution that they think is going to work. And much of that is going to be about hunches and intuition and so on. So also the future, of course, is no longer about all this competition that we used to have in the past. It's about collaboration, hyper collaboration. Right? It's about experimenting, about using a playful approach, about hyper collaboration, about creating ecosystems, not egosystems, as the car industry example earlier has shown. Very, very important here. This is what CEO of Salesforce says, Mark Benioff. We have to get to the future ahead of our customers and be ready to greet them when they arrive. That's our mission. That is your mission. How do you do that? Well, you pay attention to the future. You make it a part of your reality. One leg today, another leg in the future, bringing the two together, having foresight, developing ideas, spending 45 minutes per day on what is not already here. The 5-hour rule, as Bill Gates calls it. This is crucial, because the productivity you see increase, of course, in the midterm, you know, all of a sudden you realize, yes, you understand this better than others. That's the key. That's how you're going to get to really true digital transformation and progress. So reading books, right? That's the good start. Not just my book, Technology versus Humanity, but here's a great book list of things you can immediately start reading. And of course, I have a great book list on my website. You can scan this QR code or just go futuristgerd.com and look for my book list. You can see it there, but we're going to share the code later on as well. And my favorite book right now is The Ministry for the Future, Kim Stanley Robinson, KSR. Kim Stanley Robinson, The Ministry for the Future, explains everything in the next 10 years from a 2032 perspective. Really powerful stuff. A must read pretty much for anybody interested in what's coming towards us. So the bottom line also is, as I was talking about earlier about humans, culture still eats technology for breakfast, because we're not machines. Right? Culture trumps technology. You want to really get ahead, the key to success is culture. Using technology as a tool, not as a purpose. Right? And it's what Martin Seligman refers to as PERMA. Right? Positivity, engagement, relationships, meaning, accomplishment, and ultimately, of course, this is the most important part, trust. Your customers want to know that they can trust you. Not that you have the best tech. If you have the worst tech, they will not like you anyway. But developing trust, that is the key behind everything. And that remains key to doing good business and the key for success in the near future. So thanks very much for your time. I know this was a lot of information, kind of a firework of ideas, but we're going to share the video and the slides so you can dive a little bit deeper and listen to it again. And now we're going to jump into a Q&A session. I want to get the tough questions from you, so gear up and fire away, and see you in a minute.